Thomas. Welcome to Diaspora Food Stories. How are you?
I'm fine. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. And you're joining us from Southern California
Yes, indeed.
by the way of Baltimore, East Coast guy.
That too.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to speak with you. So, we're going to get into all things travel as the founder of Soul of America, really pioneering the Black travel movement and getting ready to celebrate 30 years. So, congratulations.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, these are stories, right? And we know that with all kinds of stories, there's food involved, there's people involved, there's so many
Mm,
things involved. But let's just first take everyone back to Baltimore.
mm.
And where did those seeds of travel begin?
Actually, it started in California and
Oh,
then to Baltimore.
okay.
When we were 2 years old, my dad took us by train from Baltimore to San Francisco. And we lived in San Francisco from 1959 to 1962. Mom and dad, little breakup. Mom brought us back to Baltimore home.
Hmm.
And so I mostly grew up in Baltimore, specifically West Baltimore.
Okay.
And so I've seen the good and the bad of West Baltimore, including some of what you people saw on The Wire.
Yeah.
I wasn't there when it got quite that bad, but I saw it coming.
Mhm.
And that also, I think, shaped me in a way that I knew there were certain things I would want to do if I ever had a chance to represent or do good for the Black community.
Mhm.
Because I'm one of the 20 percenters. And you know what the 20 percenters are?
No.
The 20% who made it.
Okay. Okay.
And so for the 80% that didn't, I figured I had to represent the proper way.
Awesome. Awesome.
And then speeding up forward a little bit, I went up to high school at Northwestern High School in Baltimore, 10th grade, I believe it was. And my Black experience teacher was a Mr. Grant.
You had a Black experience teacher.
Yes,
Wow.
one of the few. And he's the one that opened my eyes to Black history, the importance of it, the parts of our culture to celebrate and, to really embrace and grasp. So he was the first. And I took that when I went to college at University of Pittsburgh.
Okay.
And I met my second big inspiration that would play a role in the development of Soul of America Black Travel website and maps. Um, and that was Dr. Jack Daniels. I think he's recently retired, but I still stay connected with him.
Awesome.
He took it to the next level in terms of the Black experience, in terms from an academic perspective. But I had a third big influence while I was at University of Pittsburgh, Kuntu Repertory Theater, which was founded by August Wilson,
Mm.
Rob Penny, and Dr. Vernell Lilly. Now, what was interesting is I met August Wilson just before he blew up, right? And somebody from Broadway approached him. They also approached Rob Penny. They were the two playwrights doing, really good Black theater. And I know the audience doesn't know this, but Rob Penny was every bit as good as August Wilson. But Rob Penny's wife begged him to stay in Pittsburgh.
Okay.
August Wilson went to Broadway. We all know the result.
Mhm.
Dr. Lilly was the director of Country Repertory Theater, and she graciously allowed me to be the sound tech for Country Repertory Theater while I was at University of Pittsburgh. And so that was just amazing experience to hear these Black stories. Like the stuff that Rob Penny and August Wilson wrote it would just reverberate in your soul.
And just for some of the listeners who don't know, share a little bit of their work, if you don't mind.
August Wilson, Fences, if you've seen that movie, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, um, Radio Golf. Uh, there's more. Not
Definitely
remember them all.
Fences with Denzel Washington, Viola
Yeah,
Davis. We
right,
know
right.
that was on the big screen.
And then, of course, Ma Rainey's Back Bottom had Chadwick
Chadwick
Boseman.
Boseman, yep. Mhm.
And uh, But I also have to shout out to Rob Penny for Little Willie Armstrong Jones.
Okay.
If you ever see a Black theater doing a production of that, check it out.
Oh,
It is really, really worth it. To me, it was as good as Fences.
right. And when
And
you
I
were going
was
to school, what were you studying? When you were in school, what were you studying?
mostly communications as
Okay.
an undergrad, minor in Black studies. And because unless you were going to be a teacher, you couldn't get a job in Black studies, right? And so I did that as an undergrad. And then when I graduated, I wanted to make a little bit of money. And so I went out about 6 months, worked in life insurance. That was not for me. So I went back to school, but I actually went to school and got a master's degree in information science. I had to go 20 straight months to earn that master's. And then, so that started to give me some tech background. And then after that, I moved from Pittsburgh to Silicon Valley,
Okay.
working down in the Sunnyvale, Cupertino, San Jose area of Silicon Valley. That's the heart of it for those that don't know.
So California just keeps coming back, huh?
Yeah. And the reason is when I lived in California from ages 2 to 5,
Mhm.
I always promised myself that I was going to return to California.
Mm,
I had other options, but I wanted to go back to California.
okay.
Made a lot of my family mad, but I said, oh, this is my dream.
Right.
Didn't know anybody. Just packed up, came out, took my shot. Worked at Lockheed first, and then landed with Lockheed at one of those contract layoffs. So they lost a contract layoff.
Mm,
Never want to work for a company like that if you can avoid it. um, but I went to HP, Hewlett Packard,
mhm.
when Hewlett Packard was a very respectable company. Not so much these days,
Okay.
or not as much, I should say. But I continued to strengthen some of my technical know-how and meet some really important players in the industry. I even met Steve Jobs, spoke to him
Okay.
for about 5 minutes one-on-one
Wow.
just before he introduced the Macintosh.
Wow. You really getting in on that early
Yeah,
stage,
yeah.
early stage.
And once I saw the Mac, I knew that would be me, and that's what I'm using. I've been using Macs pretty much every since then, even though I worked at HP, which was a PC company.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
when I bought my first computer, I bought a Mac. I didn't buy a PC because I
Wow.
had to use PC at work. Well,
Absolutely.
anyway, so that as I moved along, working at HP, that's when I started to really travel on my own.
Okay.
And I went to New Orleans World's Fair, I believe it was 1984. I went to a lot of stuff in DC, Baltimore, Philly, New York, went to Chicago, New Orleans. Obviously New Orleans. I went to Houston, Dallas, Miami, Detroit.
And this is personal, not business?
This was personal stuff
Okay.
first.
Okay.
And I was asking myself, why can't I find Black culture like I want to see it? Why isn't it easy?
Mhm.
And I was also a person who would buy Frommers and Folders and this one other guide called Access Guides for travel guides. And they simply, they just wouldn't list Black heritage, Black culture, Black restaurants, just wouldn't do it,
Mhm.
with two exceptions, three. They would list the Apollo in New York. They would list Howard University in Washington, D.C.,
Mhm.
and they would list where Dr. King was buried in Atlanta, and then just do a little sidebar and say, oh, yeah, by the way, there's some Black colleges there too.
Mm.
That was it. Literally, that was it. And I was infuriated by that. Really, really infuriated. And I said, oh man, I don't know about this. Well,
Mhm.
anyway, there was a little interlude there where I actually chose to go to business school. And I went to UCLA business school and I majored in marketing.
Okay.
But while I was there, the last thing that hit me that pushed me over the edge and said, I'm going to publish
Mhm.
is when Access Guides came out for Chicago. And it was their first access guide for Chicago. They had a series of others, and they had this way of presenting information that I really liked the way they did it.
Mhm.
And they said, do not go to the south side of Chicago.
Mm, mm.
I'm almost quoting it verbatim.
Wow.
Almost, right? I was furious. I said, well, I'm going to write the editor here. And I actually typed up the letter. And then I got to the last point where I, was getting ready to get the stamps in the envelope. And I said, you know what? We shouldn't have to beg people to do what we need to do for ourselves.
Mhm.
And I roundfouled that letter. And I made a promise to myself that I was going to do something, that I knew that eventually I was going to do something for Chicago,
Mhm.
something for Baltimore, something for Washington, something for New York City,
Right.
probably Philly. I had an old girlfriend there too, back from Pittsburgh days, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. And LA, I would do, and San Francisco, Oakland. Um, and I wanted to do New Orleans sooner too, but there's a whole nother backstory there. But anyway, being in business school, it gave me the opportunity to draft a business plan. And I said, well, how am I going to do this? Well, it's got to be print because we're talking 1990. And in 1990, you pretty much did print. There was a way to communicate over the internet, but they were very rudimentary, very,
Yeah, well,
most people
definitely
wouldn't use them,
wasn't.
would
Mhm.
not use them. And so when that guy that did Facebook came along, that was considered a giant leap forward. Yeah, I'm not Facebook, AOL,
Okay.
AOL. When he came along, um, Steve Case, and and I looked at that. What was funny to me is that I was also a part of the Black Engineers of Northern California. Shout out to Hattie Carwell, Prez Emeritus of that group. And I remember she asked me to talk with the LA Council of Black Engineers to see if we could work out a better way to electronically communicate. And we actually talked about creating something that AOL became
Okay.
before AOL introduced it, but we didn't follow through. So I made myself a promise from that experience that I was going to make sure that I follow through when I became a publisher.
Mhm.
So when I've completed my business plan in my last year, because it's a 2-year program, um, I I had the plan ready, but I said, you know what? What I learned in business school, I better do research first, real research. So I convinced one of my schoolmates to join me. Since I don't have her permission, I'm not going to name it. Um, she helped me, and I said, "Well, let's do this survey on Hollywood Boulevard, and just ask Black people, all the Black people that walk by, what would they want in a
Mhm.
map?" And then I thought about it. I said, "Wait a minute, if we do that, we better have some reason for them to want to stop and talk to us."
Right.
I actually made up a set of T-shirts called "The Soul of Hollywood," and to my knowledge, it was the first map that laid out all the Blacks that had stars on the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
Nice.
And we printed that on the T-shirt, and I paid a designer to do a nice design and all that stuff. And I sold them real cheap just to get people's interest.
Mhm.
And but we collected about 1,000 surveys directly from folks, and they were coming from everywhere, right? So I felt like it was statistically relevant for the goal we had in mind. Um, and from that, I said, okay, well, I'm gonna I'm gonna create this company that I'm gonna call GoWare, and it's gonna feature soul of different destinations.
Mm.
So it was gonna be like GoWare, soul of Los Angeles,
Mhm.
soul of Oakland, San Francisco, and I actually did put Oakland before San Francisco. Soul of Atlanta, soul of Washington, D.C., and I was planning to do a soul of Chicago too. We actually paid for the design of it, even though we didn't print it. And then I figured I'd try those out to see how well I could move them in retail channels. And I was successful at getting them placed in Borders and Barnes and Noble. And Barnes and Noble had me come speak at two different locations just to promote it.
Yeah.
The and I guess at this point I can show some of what they look like. Um, this is the Go Where Travel. See the title there clearly?
Wow.
Soul of Atlanta Guide. I'm going to pull back a little bit so you can see the whole thing.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And it opens up very nicely,
Nice.
right? It's two-sided, but it is also color coded. And you see individual maps for different districts. You see those?
Nice. I do. I
Right?
do.
We also created, here's the cover. Notice we have an overview map as well showing the districts covered.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if you bought this, you immediately had a way of finding the soul of Washington, D.C.
Love that.
from Soul of America. And it's all, it's coded. So it's really high quality.
Mm-hmm.
And I sold them for, I think, $10.
Okay.
Because you had to sell it at that price because they're going to make 50% on it. If they don't make at least 5, they're not interested.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I did that. I also, of course, made a Atlanta version,
Okay.
right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And a Soul of Los Angeles, which was the first. We were still learning how to do things with the first one.
Right.
I don't have that handy right now. And then we made a little bit better version called the Soul of Oakland / San Francisco. Now, the timeline for actual creation of the maps was the first one was Soul of Los Angeles in late June of 1994.
Okay.
So that's why we'll be celebrating our 30th anniversary.
Nice.
Okay.
Nice.
6 months later, we did the Soul of Oakland, San Francisco. Logistically easier to do both of those because I was here on the West Coast.
Mm-hmm.
After getting my UCLA MBA, I stayed in LA for a year while my wife was graduating, who you met. And then we both moved to the Bay Area.
Okay.
So I went back, worked in corporate marketing for a company. I don't have to name them.
Mm-hmm.
And but I had this in my mind that I wanted to do this. At the same time, I was dealing with, okay, how do I grow my corporate career in marketing? So I had to be careful how much time I allowed
Yeah. Balancing.
allocated.
Yeah.
But by 94, some things opened up into time-wise, and I was able to commit a good 6 hard months getting that Soul of Los Angeles guide map ready first. All the while I was still accumulating data
Mm-hmm.
about sites and openings, restaurants, cultural sites, museums, Black historic sites like the western terminus of the Underground Railroad in San Francisco, all of those things.
Wow.
And so and by the way, the lady that founded that was a madam.
Okay.
Yes, she was a madam, and she used a lot of her profits to help runaway slaves make it to San Francisco.
Nice.
Okay,
Nice.
another story. Anyway, so that proceeded, and I got placed there. I also got placed in some Black bookstores and also a gallery, Samuel's Gallery.
Mm-hmm.
Used to be in Jack London Square, Oakland.
Okay.
Samuel's great guy, great guy. Actually, he sold most of my maps of everybody, and I bought paintings from him and everything too. So that's all cool. But he was like a real key person because he gave a lot of Black artists help to get started, to showcase their wares, not just what we were doing with the maps,
Mm-hmm.
but also other artists. And that was just fantastic. And
So at this time, did you decide, you know what, definitely I'm a publisher now. Were you thinking I would do a couple of guys just to get it out there? Or did you say, you know what, no, we are full throttle with moving forward in this business?
well, no, because I had bills to pay.
Mm-hmm.
My wife and I bought our first house.
Okay.
And so I kept moonlighting.
Okay.
I moonlighted up until 2000. But I did. The next big milestone was 1997 when I placed an ad on what was called Net Noir at the time.
Okay.
I don't know if your audience remembers that, but
Yeah.
them and Black Voices and Urban Box Office were the three major first Black websites.
Okay.
And they all debuted around sometime 95 or so. And because they were so new, when they pitched to some VCs, they got money.
Okay.
And they were able to build up. So you wanted to at least advertise to that audience. And I placed my first ad with them, and I was like 12 rows down, 12 pages down hierarchically.
Hmm.
Uh, and I said, wait a minute, there's got to be a better way than this. And the people who bought my maps, because I actually started doing trade shows around the country, and the good folks at Emerge magazine heard about us.
Hmm.
And they did a little story about us,
Nice.
actually a pretty good spread about us.
Nice.
That's me and my wife, and some others, and that was nice. I got also coverage in New York Times, Washington Post, Atlanta Journal-Constitution, San Francisco Chronicle, LA Times, Chicago Tribune, just about every Black newspaper in the country. Because if you hook up with just two of the main ones, they'll get you covered. Like Afro American in Baltimore, they'll cover all of theirs, and
Mhm.
uh, uh, the Pittsburgh paper, they hooked me up too, because eventually I did a Pittsburgh guide. Uh, but anyway, so we were really, really in the news,
Mhm. Mhm.
and including USA Today, when who we got a really great compliment from Arthur Frommer, the guy that does Frommer's Guides.
Mhm.
And he said, "This is fantastic. This is so needed. I salute him." And he said that in USA Today. And that helped really move the needle for us. But that was 97. So we're a little before that anyway. We then said, after talking, with my wife and my brother, who also wanted to support me,
Mhm.
um, we said, well, we probably have to create our own website.
Yeah.
And so I did. And when I first launched the website in March of 97, so it was the first Black travel website.
Congratulations.
Yes. And it was called Go Where Travel, just like that Go Where Travel name. I don't know if everybody can see that.
Mhm.
See that? Go Where Travel at
Okay.
the top. And so it was called Go Where Travel.com. And I would feature Soul Love, all of those different guides. I just took the content and I moved it online. And I actually took the Chicago content and moved it online, because by then we started to get US postal mail from fans
Oh,
who begged me to put it online
okay.
and to just change my business model and go with a advertising based business model. Well, that was easy for them to say, because they didn't have to pay bills. But I said, okay, if I'm
Exactly.
going to do this, I really do have to continue my job and continue to moonlight, and I have to hire people to help, which I did. Hired a designer, a web layout person, um, and then a funny thing happened. Two of my earliest folks came to help me out. Sheila Umolu and Lisa Allman Baldwin,
Mhm.
who are still part of my team today, except for the late Sheila Umolo, I have to say. But she was with us to the very end, though. So, but they saw what we were doing, what we were working on, and it really connected with them. They
Mhm.
reached out to me, and then later we had Kaylin Thomas
Mhm. Yeah.
come on board, and Jeanette Valentine, and there were a couple other people that didn't quite stick, but everybody, people's got different lives, different choices, all that.
Let
But
me ask you this, Thomas.
yeah,
What at this around this time, because I know one of the things that we talk about in Cuisine Noir, And that we still try to dispel some of those myths is that, Black people don't travel, we don't, we're not looking for different experiences or whatever. I mean, definitely when it comes to internationally. So, what
Mhm.
around this time as you're getting going, what are you observing around Black travel and where Black people are traveling to and why?
Well, there's a couple of things. One, we've always loved beaches.
Okay.
So it was natural for us to want to travel more to the Caribbean. And so at that point, I would give a big shout out to Patricia Yarborough for creating Blue World Travel and her cruises,
Okay.
Festival at Sea. She was the first to do a major booking of a cruise. I don't know if she was the first to ever do a Black cruise, but she was the first to do a major booking, inviting a nationwide audience. That I'm certain of. And I
Okay.
remember covering that, on our website. Um, Followed by Tom Joyner and the others that came after that. But they would leave from Miami and from Fort Lauderdale to go to the Caribbean because Black folks wanted to go to beaches and they
Mhm.
wanted to go to the Caribbean and wanted to feel free, didn't want to feel like second class citizens, because so many of us had to put on that face in corporate America
Right.
where you could just let your hair down, groove, dance to the music you like, eat the food you like, etc. And so that whole thing took off. And when I saw that going on, I said, well, we got to do a solo Miami guide, and we got to do a solo Fort Lauderdale as well. So I did more research there. But they like that. There were a number of Black people who also still went to Paris and still
Mhm.
went to London.
Mhm.
London was an easy thing because you could speak English. But Paris has been a favorite of Black folks since World War One.
Absolutely.
My grandfather was one of those early colored soldiers that served over there, and he got all his medals for that. The French, they were so thankful that Black soldiers fought beside them to help them defeat the Germans in World War One. They had a certain reverence for them.
Mhm.
And that is why after, during the Harlem Renaissance folks figured out, well, I can go to Paris too.
Mhm.
And we know that whole story, right?
Mhm.
But so that sort of laid the groundwork for Black folks to go to Paris and to London. Another thing happened in the 60s. The US set up a major military bases in Germany. So you had people who were stationed near Bonn, near Frankfurt, near Cologne, and all that.
Mhm.
And so they got a taste of German life and Swiss life. So outside of those, we really didn't do a whole lot of travel
Okay.
in the late 90s there. But then it started to warm up. It started to
Mhm.
warm up. And part of the reason that warmed up is our average household incomes increased. That happened because our college graduation rates kept going like that. Even though I'm going in the opposite, I meant to do like this for the audience. Like that. So um, when you combine education, that thirst for knowledge, that thirst for world experiences with financial capability to travel,
Mhm. Mhm.
um, people really gravitated. And this was before YouTube took off, but people started that building. And then, of course, we had the YouTube and the Facebooks, followed by Instagram and the others that
Right.
came along, Yelp and so forth, who were quote inspired by Soul of America to start listing our sites, even though we saw them coming to our site for information,
Okay. Okay.
right? But in that regard, though, at first I used to be mad about it, but I'm not really mad about that anymore because I did accomplish the mission, except the getting wealthy part. But to literally change um, how media thinks of Black travel.
Right. And we still got some ways to go. I still say, you know,
Oh, we do, of course.
that in terms of destinations
Yeah,
recognizing the
but when you come
power.
from this, and
Right.
you at least get to this, that's a big deal, right?
It is,
That's a big
and
deal.
we gotta definitely continue on with the
And
progress, so
so, there's more.